My daughter didn't invite me to her wedding, but she sent me a $70,000 invoice to pay for her dream party and the honeymoon. She even had the nerve to write, "You should feel lucky I'm letting you contribute it all." I just smiled, and turned her dream into a nightmare. The cream-colored envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick and expensive between my fingers. I recognized Kathy's handwriting immediately, that precise, controlled script she'd perfected in private school, the one that always looked like it was judging you. My coffee grew cold as I stared at my name written in black ink, Mrs. Elaine Mack. Not mom, not mother, just my formal name, like I was some distant relative she barely knew. I should have thrown it away. Should have recognized the warning signs in the weight of the paper, the way my daughter's return address was embossed in gold lettering. But I was still clinging to hope then, still believing that somewhere beneath her designer clothes and cold demeanor lived the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The kitchen felt smaller as I slid my finger under the flap, the morning light filtering through my modest apartment's windows seeming somehow dimmer. I'd been living here for 3 years now, ever since Richard died and left me with more bills than inheritance. It was clean, comfortable, and mine, a sanctuary I'd built from the pieces of a life that had crumbled around me. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, not an invitation, not a wedding announcement, an invoice, professional wedding planning services, $35,000 honeymoon expenses, Tuscany, 3 weeks, $35,000 total due, $70,000 payment, due 30 days, at the bottom, in Kathy's careful handwriting. "You should feel lucky I'm letting you contribute it all. After everything you've put this family through, this is the least you can do." I read it twice, then 3 times. The words swam before my eyes, but their meaning remained crystal clear. My daughter, my only child, was charging me for a wedding I hadn't been invited to, a honeymoon I'd never even heard about, and treating it like a privilege I should be grateful for. The coffee mug slipped from my numb fingers, shattering against the linoleum floor. Brown liquid spread across the white tiles like spilled blood, and I stared at it without moving. 27 years of motherhood, and this was what I'd earned. Not a phone call, not an invitation, not even the courtesy of a conversation, an invoice. I thought about the last time I'd seen Kathy. Christmas dinner, 18 months ago, at her imposing house in Westchester. She'd greeted me at the door like an inconvenience, her smile never reaching her eyes. Throughout the evening, she'd made subtle comments about my choices, my situation, my inability to move on. Her husband Gary had mostly ignored me, and when he did speak, it was with the kind of polite condescension reserved for unwanted guests. I'd left early, claiming a headache. Kathy hadn't protested. Now, kneeling on my kitchen floor, picking up pieces of broken ceramic, I understood. I wasn't her mother anymore. I was a wallet she occasionally remembered to shake down for money. The realization should have destroyed me. Instead, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. I stood slowly, my knees protesting after 63 years of carrying the weight of other people's expectations. The invoice fluttered to the floor, and I left it there among the coffee stains and ceramic shards. Let it swim in the mess. It belonged there. Walking to my bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, lines around my eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights worrying about an ungrateful daughter, clothes that were clean but unremarkable. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who had spent her life making herself smaller so others could feel bigger. But my eyes were different now. They held something I hadn't seen in years, fury. I pulled out my laptop and began typing. Not a check, not a desperate plea for inclusion, something else entirely. My fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose, each keystroke deliberate and measured. I researched wedding venues in Westchester County, cross-referenced dates with social media posts I'd been blocked from but could still access through friends. I found the resort in Tuscany, the one with the private villas and the astronomical nightly rates. By evening, I had a complete picture of my daughter's dream wedding and honeymoon. Every detail, every expense, every vendor. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the cheap stuff I usually bought, but the good bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. I sat at my kitchen table, the invoice still on the floor where I'd left it, and made a list of phone numbers. The first call would be to Kathy's wedding planner, a woman named Christine Slaughter, according to my research. Then the resort in Tuscany, then the caterer, the florist, the photographer, all of them expecting payment from someone who thought I was nothing more than a convenient ATM. I smiled, and it felt like flexing a muscle I'd forgotten I had. Kathy wanted me to contribute to her wedding? Fine, I'd contribute, just not in the way she'd imagined. I picked up my phone and dialed the first number. A woman answered on the third ring, her voice professionally warm. Slaughter Wedding Planning. This is Christine speaking. Hello, I said, my voice steady as granite. I'm calling about the Herman Green wedding. I'm Elaine Mack, Kathy's mother. Oh, Mrs. Mack. How wonderful to finally speak with you. Kathy has mentioned you might be contributing to the wedding expenses. I have to say, she's planned something absolutely spectacular. I'm sure she has, I replied, my tone giving nothing away. I'd like to discuss the arrangements. When would be a good time to meet? Would tomorrow work? I have an opening at 2 o'clock. Perfect. I'll see you then. I hung up and reached for my wine glass. The liquid was deep red, almost the color of blood. I took a sip and felt it burn its way down my throat, warming the cold place where my heart used to be. Tomorrow, I would begin to teach my daughter about consequences, about respect, about the price of treating your mother like a stranger who owed you money. But tonight, I would plan. The invoice stared up at me from the floor, a monument to my daughter's cruelty. I left it there and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. In my dreams, I was standing in a garden at sunset, watching something beautiful burn. The morning air was crisp as I walked into Christine Slaughter's office building in White Plains. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a navy dress that had cost me 2 weeks' grocery budget 3 years ago, my late mother's pearl necklace, and the kind of understated elegance that whispers money rather than screaming it. I wanted to look like someone who could write a $70,000 check without blinking. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt like ascending to a battlefield. My reflection in the polished steel doors showed a woman who had shed 20 years overnight, not younger, wiser, harder, more focused than I'd been since Richard's death had scattered my world like dandelion seeds in the wind. Christine Slaughter's office was everything I'd expected. Cream walls, gold accents, and the kind of furniture that cost more than most people's cars. She greeted me with the practiced warmth of someone who made her living managing other people's dreams and neuroses. Mrs. Mack, please, have a seat. Can I offer you coffee? Water? Coffee would be lovely, I said, settling into the plush chair across from her glass desk. Through the windows, I could see the Hudson River gleaming in the afternoon sun, and for a moment I felt like I was looking down at my old life from a great height. Christine poured coffee from an elegant silver service, her movements fluid and rehearsed. I have to tell you, your daughter has exquisite taste. The Riverside Manor is simply stunning for an October wedding, and the details she's chosen, the hand-blown glass centerpieces, the imported Italian linens, everything is perfection. Tell me about the timeline, I said, accepting the delicate china cup. When exactly is the wedding? October 15th, just 3 weeks away now. Of course Kathy mentioned you might be traveling, which is why you won't be able to attend. Her tone was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight uptick at the end, a question disguised as a statement. Something like that, I replied, letting my silence speak volumes. Let her wonder. And the honeymoon arrangements? Oh, that's going to be absolutely magical. 3 weeks at Ville Serenata in Tuscany. It's a private resort, very exclusive. They're flying out the day after the wedding. Christine's eyes sparkled with the kind of vicarious excitement wedding planners cultivated. The invoice I sent over covers the upgraded villa with the infinity pool and private chef service. Invoice? I set down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. I'm afraid there's been some confusion. The sparkle in Christine's eyes dimmed slightly. Confusion? I never agreed to pay for my daughter's wedding or honeymoon. In fact, I wasn't even invited to the wedding. The words came out calm, measured, but I watched their impact register on Christine's face like ripples across still water. Oh, she blinked rapidly, her professional composure cracking. But Kathy said, she told me you were eager to contribute, that you felt terrible about missing the ceremony and wanted to make it up to her by covering the major expenses. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Did she really? How interesting. Tell me, Christine, when someone commissions your services, they sign a contract, don't they? Well, yes, of course. And who signed the contract for this wedding? Christine's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Kathy and Gary, but she assured me that you would be handling the payments for certain items totaling $70,000. I opened my purse and pulled out the invoice. Now neatly folded. This arrived yesterday. No phone call. No discussion. Just a bill with a charming note about how lucky I should feel to be allowed to contribute. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Christine stared at the invoice, then at me, then back at the paper. I could practically see the calculations running behind her eyes. Deposits made, vendors paid, her own commission hanging in the balance. Mrs. Mack, I had no idea. Kathy presented this as an arrangement you'd already agreed to. She seemed so confident that you would cover these expenses. Did she pay you anything up front? A small deposit, $5,000. The rest was supposed to come from you this week with the balance due on the wedding day. I nodded slowly, filing this information away. And what happens if those payments don't materialize? Christine's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her own coffee cup. Well, we would have to, that is to say, without payment, we couldn't provide the services. All of them? The vendors require payment before or on the day of service. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the photography, everything. Her voice was barely above a whisper now. If the payments don't come through, there would be no wedding. I sat back in my chair, letting this sink in. Kathy had built her dream wedding on the assumption that she could bully me into paying for it. She'd counted on my maternal guilt, my desperate desire to be included in her life, my history of saying yes when I should have said no. She'd counted wrong. "Christine," I said, my voice gentle now, almost motherly. "You seem like a lovely person and I imagine you work very hard for your clients. This situation isn't your fault. My daughter has put you in a terrible position." "What? What should I do?" The question came out like a prayer. "That depends. How much time do you need to make alternative arrangements? If, hypothetically, the funding for this wedding disappeared, for a wedding of this scale, with just 3 weeks' notice?" Christine shook her head. "It would be impossible. The deposits alone. Most vendors don't offer refunds for cancellations this close to the event date. Even if the cancellation is due to non-payment by the client, the contracts are with Kathy and Gary. They're legally responsible for payment regardless of family arrangements." The implication hung heavy in the air between us. I stood up, smoothing my dress. "Christine, I want you to do something for me. When my daughter calls, and she will call, probably within the next day or two, I want you to tell her exactly what you told me, that without the payments I was supposedly going to make, there will be no wedding. But Mrs. Mack, and then I want you to give her my phone number and tell her that if she wants to discuss this further, she needs to call me directly. Not send invoices. Not make assumptions. Call me." Christine nodded mutely, her face ashen. "One more thing," I added, pausing at the door. "Don't feel bad about any of this. You're not responsible for my daughter's choices or their consequences. You're a businesswoman providing a service, and you deserve to be paid for your work, just not by me." I left her sitting there, staring at the invoice I'd placed on her desk like evidence in a criminal trial. The elevator ride down felt different from the ride up, lighter somehow, as if I'd left some invisible burden in that office along with my daughter's assumptions about my compliance. Outside, the October air carried the scent of dying leaves and coming winter. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't called in months. Janet Waters had been my neighbor when Kathy was small. Back when we lived in the house, Richard and I had saved for years to buy. Janet's daughter Rosa had been Kathy's best friend until high school. When my daughter decided that Rosa's family wasn't quite prestigious enough for her social aspirations, Janet answered on the second ring. "Elaine? My God, it's been forever. How are you, honey?" "I'm well, Janet. Actually, I'm better than I've been in years. Listen, I have a favor to ask. Do you still have Rosa's number? I'd like to get back in touch." "Of course, she'd love to hear from you. She asks about you every time we talk. You know she's a wedding photographer now? Has her own business and everything?" "A wedding photographer." I smiled, feeling the pieces of my plan shift and settle into place like a puzzle finally revealing its picture. "That's perfect, Janet. Absolutely perfect." After I hung up, I walked slowly back to my car, my mind already racing ahead to the next phase. Kathy wanted a dream wedding? She was about to discover that dreams could become nightmares with remarkable speed. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Christine Slaughter. I wanted to thank you for being so understanding today. You're right, I'm just doing my job. I hope everything works out for your family." I typed back quickly, "It will. Just not the way my daughter expects." As I drove home, I found myself humming, something I hadn't done in months. The afternoon sun slanted through my windshield, and for the first time since Richard's death, I felt like I was driving towards something instead of away from it. Rosa Pratt Kelly hadn't changed much in the 15 years since I'd last seen her. Same warm brown eyes. Same genuine smile that reached all the way to her soul. She'd agreed to meet me at a small cafe in Terrytown, halfway between our respective lives, and when she walked through the door, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. The comfort of unconditional acceptance. "Mrs. Mack," she said, approaching my corner table with arms already extended. "You look wonderful." I stood to embrace her, breathing in the faint scent of vanilla perfume that transported me back to afternoons when she and Kathy would sprawl across my living room floor, painting their nails and whispering secrets. Back when my daughter still laughed freely, before she learned that love was a commodity to be rationed and withheld. "Please, call me Elaine. We're both adults now, after all." I gestured to the chair across from "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." Rosa settled into her seat, her photographer's eye automatically scanning the cafe's lighting and angles before focusing entirely on me. "Mom told me you wanted to discuss some kind of photography work. I have to admit, I'm curious. It's been so long since we've talked." How much has your mother told you about my situation with Kathy? A shadow crossed Rose's face. Some. I know you two haven't been close lately. I'm sorry about that, Elaine. I remember how tight you were when we were kids. Do you remember why you and Kathy stopped being friends? Rose's laugh held no humor. High school. She decided I wasn't sophisticated enough for her new crowd, said my family was holding her back from her potential. She traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. It hurt at the time, but honestly, looking back, I dodged a bullet. What do you mean? I've kept tabs on her through social media over the years. Watched her treat people like stepping stones. Remember Tommy Brown from our graduating class? She dated him for 2 years, let him pay for everything, then dumped him the week before prom because she got asked by the quarterback. Rose's eyes met mine. Some people never grow out of using others, you know? The waitress brought our coffee, and I used the interruption to study Rose's face. She'd grown into herself beautifully, confident without being harsh, successful without losing her compassion. Everything I'd hoped Kathy might become. Tell me about your photography business, I said. It's going well. I specialize in weddings and family portraits. There's something magical about capturing people's happiest moments, you know? Though lately, she paused, stirring sugar into her coffee. Lately, I've been getting some interesting requests, such as divorce documentation, infidelity cases, people who need photographic evidence for legal proceedings. Rose's smile turned sharp. Turns out my eye for capturing candid moments is useful for more than just wedding bliss. I felt that familiar settling sensation in my chest, pieces clicking into place. How do you feel about photographing events where you're not exactly welcome? Rose's eyebrows rose. You mean like crashing parties? More like documenting them, from a distance, for someone who has a legitimate interest in what happens but can't be there themselves. We looked at each other across the small table, understanding passing between us like a shared secret. Rosa leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Elaine, what exactly are you planning? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of Kathy's invoice. Rose's expression shifted as she read, her jaw tightening with each line. $70,000? For a wedding you weren't invited to? Her voice carried the same outrage I'd felt but hadn't allowed myself to fully experience. That's beyond cruel, Elaine. That's sociopathic. I want you to photograph her wedding, but if you weren't invited, from outside the venue. The Riverside Manor has extensive grounds, public areas where a whisper. I want documentation of every moment, every guest, every detail of the $70,000 celebration I'm supposedly paying for but not allowed to attend. Rosa was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. That's not illegal. The property boundaries are clearly marked and there are several public access points with clear sightlines to the garden area where most ceremonies are held. You photographed there before? Last spring. A May wedding. The bride's ex-husband wanted documentation for a custody hearing. Something about her lifestyle choices affecting their daughter. Rose's smile was grim. Turned out she was serving alcohol to minors at the reception. Lost joint custody. And you're comfortable with this kind of work? Elaine, I've watched too many good people get trampled by selfish ones. If I can help someone protect themselves or get the truth, then yes, I'm very comfortable with it. She pulled out her own phone, scrolling through her calendar. October 15th, you said? Yes, but Rosa, there's more. I told her about my conversation with Christine Slaughter, about the payments that weren't coming, about the house of cards that was about to collapse around Kathy's perfect day. Rosa listened without interruption, her expression growing more amazed with each detail. So when you don't pay, there won't be a wedding. At least not the wedding she's planned. The question is whether she'll find a way to salvage something smaller, more modest, or if she'll have to postpone entirely. Either way, you want it documented. I want proof of the consequences of her choices, not for revenge. Well, not only for revenge, but for my own peace of mind. I need to see that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're above them. Rosa nodded slowly. I understand. And honestly, after what she put you through, what she's putting you through now, I think you're being remarkably restrained. There's something else, I continued. After the wedding, or whatever happens instead of the wedding, I suspect there will be fallout, phone calls, visits, attempts at manipulation or guilt tripping. I want you to teach me how to document things properly. Audio, video, written records. I want a complete archive of how she handles not getting her way. You're building a case. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. I met her eyes steadily. I've spent 30 years prioritizing my daughter's feelings over my own dignity. That ends now, but I want to do this smart, not just angry. Rosa reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Elaine, I want you to know something. What happened between Kathy and me in high school? It wasn't really about sophistication or social climbing. She told people that my family wasn't good enough for her because my dad was just a mechanic and my mom cleaned houses. I felt my heart clench. Rosa, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Because you know what? When I graduated valedictorian and got a full scholarship to art school, you were at the ceremony cheering louder than my own parents. You brought me flowers and told me how proud you were. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Kathy didn't even acknowledge it happened. The memory came flooding back. 17-year-old Rosa in her cap and gown, radiant with achievement, while Kathy sulked in the car because the ceremony was boring and she was missing a pool party. I'd been so proud of Rosa. So disappointed in my daughter's selfishness. You remember that? I remember everything about that day. It was the first time an adult had ever told me I was worthy of celebration just for being myself. Not for how I served them or what I could do for them, but just for existing and trying my best. Rosa squeezed my hand. So yes, Elaine, I'll help you document your daughter's wedding. And I'll teach you everything I know about protecting yourself from people who think love is a transaction. We spent another hour planning logistics, discussing camera angles and legal boundaries, contingency plans for different scenarios. Rosa showed me apps for recording phone calls, techniques for documenting interactions, ways to create an unshakable record of events. As we prepared to leave, she pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal cell. Day or night, Elaine. If things get ugly after the wedding, if she tries to corner you or manipulate you, you call me immediately, okay? I tucked the card into my wallet, next to the photo of Kathy I'd been carrying for 20 years, the one from her high school graduation, where she was smiling genuinely for once. Looking at it now, I realized I'd been mourning the wrong person. The daughter in that photo had been dying by degrees for years, replaced by someone who measured love in dollar signs and saw family as an inconvenience. Rosa, I said as we stood to leave. Do you ever regret losing Kathy's friendship? She considered this for a moment, then shook her head. I regret who she chose to become, but losing her friendship? No. It taught me that some people will only value you as long as you're useful to them. Better to learn that lesson early than spend your whole life being used. Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not just because I had an ally now, but because I'd remembered what it felt like to be valued for who I was, rather than what I could provide. Rosa saw me, not as a checkbook or a source of guilt or obligation, but as a person worthy of respect and loyalty. For the first time since opening that invoice, I smiled without bitterness. Kathy thought she'd found a way to extract money from me while keeping me at arm's length. Instead, she'd given me something far more valuable, absolute clarity about who she really was, and who I intended to become. The phone call started 3 days after my meeting with Christine Slaughter. Not from Kathy, that would have required her to acknowledge that I was a person rather than an ATM, but from Gary, her husband-to-be. His voice on my answering machine was tight with barely controlled panic. Elaine, it's Gary. We need to talk. There seems to be some confusion about the wedding payments. Call me back as soon as possible. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, listening to the message play 3 more times. Each repetition revealed new layers of desperation beneath his attempted authority. Gary Green had always struck me as the kind of man who solved problems by throwing money at them or delegating them to someone else. Now he was discovering that some problems couldn't be bought or delegated away. The second message came that evening. Elaine, this is getting ridiculous. Kathy is beside herself. The wedding is in 2 weeks. You need to call us back and sort this out. By the 4th day, Kathy herself finally condescended to contact me. Her voice was ice-wrapped in silk. Every word precisely enunciated like she was speaking to a difficult child. Mother, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it stops now. Our wedding planner says you're refusing to honor your commitments. This is my wedding day we're talking about. My once-in-a-lifetime moment. Whatever petty grievance you're nursing needs to take a backseat to what's important here. I played the message twice, marveling at her ability to make herself the victim in a situation where she'd tried to extort $70,000 from someone she'd excluded from her wedding. No acknowledgement of the invoice's cruelty. No recognition that she'd never actually asked me to contribute. Just outrage that I wasn't complying with her assumptions. Rosa called that afternoon to check in. How are you holding up, Elaine? I saw the venue this morning. They're still setting up for Saturday, but I heard the staff talking. Apparently, several vendors are demanding payment up front now instead of waiting until the event. Good, I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. Let her scramble. Let her learn what it feels like when other people's cooperation isn't guaranteed. There's something else. Rose's voice carried a note of excitement. I was photographing an engagement session at the park near your old house yesterday, and I ran into Jacqueline Pelosi. Remember her? She used to live 3 doors down from you. I remembered Jacqueline, a sweet woman whose husband had died young, leaving her to raise 2 sons alone. We'd bonded over morning coffee and the challenges of single motherhood after Richard's death. She asked about you. Rosa continued. When I told her what was happening with Kathy's wedding, she got this look on her face. Turns out she works for the catering company that's supposed to handle the reception. My heart stopped. What did she say? She said Kathy has been an absolute nightmare to deal with, screaming at servers during the tasting, demanding changes to the menu at the last minute, treating everyone like servants. But here's the interesting part. She also said the catering bill is $12,000, and they haven't seen a penny yet. They're one of the vendors expecting payment from me? According to Jacqueline, yes. Kathy told them her mother was covering all the major expenses and would settle up on the wedding day. Rosa paused. Jacqueline wanted me to give you a message. What message? She said to tell you that if you decide